Good morning, everyone. My name is Dale Petersdorf, and this is the Project Scarecrow podcast. It is Monday morning, about 9:40 a.m. exactly, on Monday Monday the 20th, 2019. The purpose of this podcast is to introduce you to the people, ideas, and resources available to improve the quality of life and reduce the cost of care for our patient members. Our mission is to facilitate access to quality of life products, therapies, and other services for Oregonians with debilitating medical conditions. We're a network of businesses, individuals, and other organizations, and we're headquartered in Salem, Oregon, and we're registered as a 501c3 public charity. This podcast is made possible with the help of the Cannabis Citizens Public Forum, run by Tom Pamelia. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Dale. Thank you very much for that intro. It's really great to bring this to the public. Cannabis Citizen Public Forum, just as a quick intro, is a platform for anybody to bring their nonprofit, their new business, their startup to the public, or just bring their discussion to their topics. It's about unification, it's about leadership, and it's about communication. And I brought to the forefront what I called CCPF in 2017 as a response to the new administration and its very harmful rhetoric and what seemed like we were slipping back into the McCarthy area as far as the drug war. We're now here in 2019, and this is a very, very exciting development. Dale's here to bring forth some very, very detailed information about Project Scarecrow, and I'd like to go ahead and queue up and just give us the goods, Dale. I appreciate you being on this morning.
No problem, Tom. Thank you very much. And we wouldn't be able to do this without you. So just full disclosure to everyone, this is kind of my first rodeo. But as far as podcasting, so Tom is being a big help to us by facilitating this broadcast, and I'm just very grateful for his assistance, and I just wanted to say that. Moving on, Project Scarecrow is just launched our website, and we have been in development since 2016, and we are just launching what we call our seed stage donation campaign, where we are working to raise funds to get our program up and running full speed. Basically, Project Scarecrow is designed to work with local businesses that all throughout Oregon to donate goods, services, therapies, and things of that nature directly to our patient members who are vetted as having a debilitating medical condition. So in order to get that running, we need to get a few things either purchased or paid for. Like, for example, we're looking to raise a minimum of $10,000 initially. These funds will be used to pay for essential startup costs like website development, maintenance, administrative back-end development, like getting contracts written up and things of that nature, and legal expenses, marketing, membership, and seed stage donor benefits packages. We'll go into that a little bit later. And a card printing machine. The card printing machine is going to allow us to print in-house membership cards directly for our membership, so that that will allow us to ensure that a person's personal information and their identity are as secure as they would be from a government issue ID card. So let's see. The seed stage donor packages They come with benefits. So we've got things like T-shirts, pins, and coins. Once we're able to raise enough startup funding, we can place the orders for these items and start issuing people's thank you items and benefits through, and get events scheduled. So the people who have VIP access can start taking advantage of those benefits. And meeting these fundraising goals is really going to help us get our programming started, because one of the major things that Project Scarecrow is set up for is that we have adopted the same definition for debilitating medical condition as the Oregon medical marijuana program. So where we're really seeing a lot of interest and support are coming from Oregon medical marijuana program patients who have been largely disenfranchised from affordable, safe access to resources that they've become accustomed to over the past 20 years of Oregon's medical marijuana program. And since 2016, that access has all but disappeared. At least, the medical program is all but gone. And these patients, a lot of, many people who qualify for the reduced card fees they have a debilitating medical condition and they have limited financial resources, either because they can't work because of their condition, or they're elderly or on fixed incomes, living off of Social Security income and things of that nature. So these are folks who can't afford to go into the newly established retail market and be able to get their needs met like they have been for the past 20 years through the established medical program. And Project Scarecrow acknowledges that while we can't do anything with cannabis itself, Oregon's law, rules, and regulations have already established a pathway for OLCC cannabis licensees to make these donations happen once again, except there's been no incentive for them to do so. In fact, many licensees that I've spoken with are unaware of the allowances that are written into the state legislature that allow them to make charitable donations of cannabis and cannabinoid products directly to people who are registered with the state's medical marijuana program. And we're also looking to work with other like integrative medicine, acupuncturists, chiropractors, massage therapists, dietitians, nurses, and we want to work with all these different industries and markets to bring increased access to care for Oregonians with debilitating medical conditions. So let's make no mistake, Project Scarecrow is not a cannabis organization. We're a compassion-based organization, and we care about people, and we don't segregate them by the types of medicines they choose to use. We just try and help them get better access to care so they can live a higher quality of life.
Dale, that's a really well said introduction to this. There's so much information to parlay to the public. We're going to be spending some time in the form of blog posts and in the form of podcasts and in the form of events literally talking to people in person, explaining to them what was fleshed out very carefully in the tutorial segment of the website. And that's probably maybe a podcast episode all by itself, is going through the various ways that a licensee can act charitably towards a OMMP patient. And I just wanted to, maybe give us a little bit of a cue up to talk about that stage 1 triage versus the stage 2 triage, because there's a patienthood membership, but right now you're taking patient memberships from anybody who would like to submit their application. However, the people who are going to be the first to be benefited are kind of like what you call the stage 1. Could you explain that a little bit more?
So I guess what I was looking at is we have a little bit of a patient member triage going on. And what that means is that we are looking to serve the Oregonians with debilitating medical conditions who are at the most risk for not being able to either receive or have access to or afford care. So we want to make sure that our most vulnerable Oregonians are looked after first. So if you qualify for receiving Social Security income, you're on the SNAP program, or you are an Oregon. You're a veteran of the United States military, or you are on Oregon Health Plan. Those are all qualifying. Those are all benchmarks that the state uses to determine whether or not these individuals qualify for reduced card fees for their Oregon Medical Marijuana Program patient card. So in similar fashion, since we adopted the same definition for debilitating medical condition, it seemed only fitting to create a patient triage in a similar fashion. So for those who have limited incomes or are just generally disadvantaged or on and need qualify for public assistance programs, we want to make sure that those folks don't get pushed aside for folks with more money. And I think we're seeing a lot of that all too often here, especially in our industry, where folks who depend on cannabis and cannabinoid therapy for their regular quality of life, depending on their financial resources, they're either left behind or they can pay to keep up. And I don't think that's right.
It's a great way to describe it. The kind of a twofold challenge in that the potency aspects of the industry were very tightly limited and truncated. And then secondly, we have a very profit-driven ecosystem where there really isn't any companies out there that are able to go forward and act as a nonprofit to maybe get products out there that are very, very deeply needed but are not especially profitable. And so this is an opportunity for everybody to come together and kind of overcome those obstacles of non-profitability by everybody chipping in a little to make a big, big difference. And I wanted to use that as a little bit of a segue over to the other side of this, which is that the fact is that the nonprofit is launching, but it's launching immediately into a donation stage, which was dubbed the seed stage. And you made some mentions of it in your introduction, and you had given a very transparent observing viewpoint of what exactly you're going to be doing with these initial funds. And I think that's so unique. Very rarely does a nonprofit come out and say, this is what we plan to do with the initial funds that are being injected into our nonprofit. And I think that that's going to go a long way with regards to the cannabis community and will do a lot of good for people that are just trying to discover what exactly is going to happen with this organization once it has its hands on a little bit of funding. And so I would like to cue you up and describe a little bit more about the non-tangible benefits of being a seed stage donor, because it's a lifetime acknowledgement. It's something that's only going to happen for a limited period of time, where people can be a part of this donation funding, and that they get a lifetime acknowledgement. And you had mentioned the pins, the t-shirts, and the apparel and things like that, but there's also a whole you spent a lot of time thinking these things out to give kind of a lifetime opportunity to be acknowledged by the nonprofit at the events. So go ahead and give us some more information on that.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I appreciate the prodding there. So regarding the seed stage donations, I wanted, we felt like it was important to give people a chance to be a part of history. And we really believe that we're doing something special and unique with Project Scarecrow in the way we're applying tried and true methods that have worked in business and in charity in the past. So we're not really reinventing the wheel. We're just doing something different with it. And we think that that folks are really going to be interested in being a part of this new way of applying the public energy. And I say that because there's a lot of I hear a lot of talk and buzz on social media about how dissatisfied people are with the status quo. And unfortunately, a lot of folks are just too busy complaining on social media instead of getting up and going and doing something about it. And so through the entirety of Project Scarecrow is an opportunity for people to get up and go do something about it. But being a part of the seed stage fundraiser and being recognized as a seed stage donor means that you stepped up when no one else would, and said, I believe in this organization. I believe in the mission that they've laid down before us, and I support them. This is my stamp of approval, and I'm going to wear it proudly on my hat as a pin, or I'm going to display it on my membership card because I'm just that hardcore. I'm going to be a member too. And that never goes away. You'll never be able to lose that status. Regardless of what happens, you will always be a seed stage donor. It's similar to being you can only be the first at something once. And for example, we're only going to be making one run of our commemorative coins, and we're going to do a run of ceramic coins, and we're going to do a run of metallic coins. And that's going to be a limited run. They're going to be the coins are going to be sequentially numbered. So just like everyone who decides that they're going to put their hat down and support us early on, they're going to get a commemorative piece of history that is just as unique as they are. The pins are going to be sequentially numbered as well.
Oh, the pins will be too. That's really amazing to hear.
Oh yeah. That's definitely in the works, but we can't place our orders unless people start actually stepping forward and donating.
Well, there's something to be said here too, because we're talking about things like membership, and then we're saying donations, and that's really important to differentiate at this very early stage, because you can make a seed stage donation and become acknowledged as a seed stage donor without ever becoming a member. and you can also become a member right away too. And then the funds that are paid for the donation and the funds that are paid for the annual membership are both going into the same pool to help you guys do these initial necessities that get the inertia going.
Yes, absolutely. So, the seed stage donation is a one-time thing where you pick your donation, your donor package, and you make your contribution, and that then you will hold that status forever. However, while there are certain benefits with being a seed stage donor, um, they don't overlap into membership unless you're also an active member in good standing. And what that means is that you've committed to paying a regular monthly or annual dues, and then you will be recognized as a member in good standing. And that's when you will receive an actual membership card with your name and your picture on it. And that's when you're a member. And that's the idea, is that's the whole idea behind purchasing a card printing machine, so we can take care of that effort in-house and maintain the highest level of security.
Understood. Okay, so the transparency in what you're purchasing for these, donation stage is very, very helpful. And we're also kind of understanding now that the first, stage of patients that are really going to be prioritized are the ones that are already being prioritized by the state by definition. So there's no voodoo or hocus pocus around what people are really being targeted by the initial inertia of this nonprofit. But the truth of the matter is nobody is getting helped until these initial obstacles kind of get met, which is having cards in hand and having the first series of actual patient members sorted out with active OMMP status and things of that nature. Am I perceiving this correctly?
Yes, that is the first major hurdle, is being able to produce the cards that allow us to integrate our donation tracking and have it work basically in concert or parallel with the OLCC's metric tracking system. They're not going to intermingle, but the idea is that we'll be able to use barcode and magstripe technology that OLCC licensees will be, or any kind of business will be able to use to scan the card during on a donation for a patient, and then that donation can be electronically recorded for the business's records and to be reported to us, so that they can get credit for their charitable contribution to our mission. And the reason that that can be implemented at any kind of business, but where it's most important for OLCC licensees is that it is right in tune with the concerns of Oregon's Attorney General, Billy Williams, and their concerns about the diversion of Oregon's legal cannabis market, or any kind of products being diverted out of that what's the word I'm looking for?
Well,
System.
the extraditing of transported metriced recorded goods, they call it interdiction. So
Yeah, and basically the reason we're pushing so hard for these cards is so that we can make sure that there's as little room for any accusations of our program or any kind of assistance for patients being the cause of diversion. And that's where this membership card comes into play, especially well for the cannabis community.
This subject is something that we're going to flesh out in great detail in future podcasts and segments of this, because it's an integral part of the whole engineering of privacy, of giving the attorney general a due diligence, giving the people who are charitable towards the organization kind of a transparency, knowing that everything is facilitating the most amount of care and risk mitigation as possible. And the other thing that is really, from more of a technical standpoint, is important to mention is that once the cards are in play and they're being printed out and they're out into the sector where the priority one patients are able to use them on the location, those locations are not limited to just dispensaries. There's the whole segment of alternative health and in personal health businesses out there that'll be kind of what you would refer to as the extended network of business memberships. And they all have point of sale devices of some sort. And with this magnetic strip on these cards, they're universally able to be read into their systems. So with any business that's looking to participate, they can use the security features and the other membership features as much or as little as they'd like to. And I think that the building off of that is really going to be something that'll be kind of integral to giving people peace of mind, if that's worth saying.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point, is to make sure that everyone can go into, either becoming members or becoming a patient member or making donations with a relative level of security, that they're not, overstepping any bounds that might get them into trouble or cause them any social embarrassment or things of that nature.
Always worth saying. We're looking to build people up and looking to create kind of a cacophony of goodwill and kind of a boomerang of support and charitable goodwill around this huge surplus of cannabinoids. If we can just boil it down to that, is there's just a lot of good that could be happening to help mitigate harm and mitigate the suffering that's happening around the state. And so this will be kind of a series of talks between us to get into the meat and bones of this. But you did a really great job describing the seed stage. There's also going to be, what's to say, events, and that the seed stage acknowledgement will really be center to the events. There's going to be some VIP sections and some offerings for taking participation in future things that will be offered to those seed stage donors first. And so if you could give us some more information on how events will play a role in all of this.
Thank you, Tom. So events are going to be kind of an integral part of what makes Project Scarecrow so special for the general community. Patients are going to be able to receive, their donations at storefronts and retail outlets that are making them. But that only goes so far. And so what we want to do is we want to create social events where we're bringing the community together and celebrating our unity as human beings. Let's just get down to basics here. Let's not even divide us by country, because our world is so divided as it is. And Project Scarecrow is all about bringing people together. And I'm not going to use some isolating term like Americans or Oregonians in this sentence. I'm going to say people, because at the end of the day, it's one of the binding things that brings us together is our shared humanity. And I'm not interested in fostering any further division amongst our species.
Well, that's well said. I don't mean to interject, but that's kind of what everybody has been left to go away with, the feeling of separation and that we got a little bit kind of divided up by legalization and this whole situation that was democratic at the forefront, has really been non-democratic all the way through in its execution. So this whole nonprofit really looks to be like a tactical response to the way things have facilitated themselves.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I guess we're getting a little bit back into my history. I'll try and keep this quick, but I kind of started on this journey as a medical cannabis grower, and through that experience, through 2014, 15, and 16, I watched the legislative battle go down for medical, between medical and rec, and it really was. I mean, there were those of us who were just trying to keep the two systems separate but legitimate, but then there were others who were simply advocating for the emerging recreational market, because they had dollar signs in their eyes or for whatever reason they had. And then there were others who were staunchly advocating for the preservation of the medical program, and vehemently opposed any kind of emerging recreational program. And what it came down to was a battle of who had the most money and who could afford to send their lobbyist to Salem the most and pay them the best. At least that's how it appeared from my perspective at the time. And ultimately, the patients lost, and business won in a big way. And my colleagues and I weren't willing to accept that. And part of the fuel of Project Scarecrow is going to be the fact that as a nonprofit, as a 501c3, we can lobby on behalf of our beneficiaries. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take what fundings we can, and we're going to go to the State House along with other aligned organizations, and we're going to work together for our common goals. And that's how it should be. It shouldn't be just a few, big spenders who are most of the times backed by large businesses without the common good in mind. Of course, they might argue that, but I think that the general populace is largely feeling unheard at the legislative level, both locally here in Oregon and in a big way nationally. And I think that's just something that is endemic of our current political and legislative system, where we have a majority of the populace believing that their voice doesn't count, that their vote doesn't count, that their voices won't be heard if they speak up about things that they're unhappy about regarding the way their communities are run. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where people just don't take action. And those that do already, they have an agenda, and it's called maintaining the status quo, because the lack of participation in our political and legislative systems are why certain individuals stay in power, because those who don't want them in power don't play the game. And if you don't play the game, you can't win.
Right, and this is a great way for a lot of people who feel like their one little tiny voice can't really make much of a difference to bring themselves to not only a fun event, but an opportunity to give like a meaningful contribution would be a $5 bill into a donation box, or a $5 contribution to a PayPal pool that allows a small contribution that is extremely meaningful when it's stacked together with all of the other people that have been affected by these recidivist policies that have come out of Salem. And we're finding we're finding out every day that there's another, scandalous angle to this whole taxation situation. We're now hearing that there's been funds, more or less being used in Portland to take care of back pay for police and stuff like that. And so, every day you're finding out that, essentially patients pay a lot of money to be into a program, and that's a goodwill situation. And then the OLCC licensees are able to, essentially fulfill a lot of patients' needs without ever having to pay into a medical system at all. So for free, they're able to service the medical community, and this is going to be an opportunity for them to kind of actually put a little bit of heart and action behind that opportunity to be, charitable and to do something that has a meaningful impact to people that are in these priority one kind of triage category, where, a lot of these people can't even come to a dispensary because their mobility just doesn't offer that to them. So there's just going to be a lot of logistics that plays into actually getting the goods to the people that need them most. And I think that this is really going to open up the gate for everybody to shuffle through and say, man, I've always wanted to do this. I always didn't know I could, or I always thought it'd be too much work. Or I think even more popular response will be is, oh, I thought I would get in trouble, just because the way that the OLCC is creating such a fear-based climate with coming down hard with fines and literally pulling licenses for things that are against their codes.
Yeah, well, I think that creating punitive actions like that are, personally, I think it's more about generating more revenue for the state than it is about keeping our licensees in line.
There's just too many licensees from their viewpoint, and so this is their way to pare down the so to speak chaff from the straw. And like you said, it's a punitive thing, and it doesn't create an environment of lifting up the people that are having the most challenges with the businesses and with the codes. It's kind of getting hard on the people that are having the most trouble. And I think that's where the social networking within all of this, creating this bubble of goodwill and support for people that make the choice to actually take action and be an early donor or be an early supporter, because there's a lot of ways you can support this. You can be a silent, financial supporter. You can be a very outspoken social networking supporter. Even if you don't have any money that you can offer over, this is something where you can just sit home on your Instagram and your Facebook and your things and literally share the posts and share the messaging and share the screenshots, because this is something that is going to be very grassroots. Obviously, there's not a lot of funding for straight up marketing. Am I wrong?
Well, no, there's not a lot of funding for straight up anything at the moment.
That's grassroots. That's the bootstrap, way to go about it. I don't think anything in America is meaningful unless it has to be efforted towards in some grassroots way. That's just my opinion.
Right. And the progress that we've been able to make thus far has largely been on the volunteer elbow grease of people who believe in the project, like yourself. And we have some other talented individuals who have dedicated their time and their expertise to bringing us as far as we have. And you mentioned earlier that you wanted to go into the nuances of something. You wanted to go into something earlier. What was that?
Well, I briefed up everybody. I queued everybody up for the fact that we're going to have to flesh out the tutorial part of this website, because that really was the fulcrum for putting everything together in a digestible format, so that any dispensary manager, any processor licensee can sit down and say, oh my gosh, I could be doing all of these things tomorrow without doing literally anything for with regards to compliance. I just need to know that I can do it. So
Right. And so thank you for helping to cue that back up. And what I wanted to say about that was that when we do have that conversation, one of the things that we could try and do is see if we can get Peter Gendron and Amanda Borup on the line with us. Peter Gendron is the Chief Operations Officer of Project Scarecrow. He's also the president of the Oregon Sun Growers Guild and one of the top advisors to the state for cannabis legislation. So he's been, waist deep, neck deep in cannabis politics for quite some time now, since at least 2014 here in Oregon, if not longer. I know he and his family have been here since, have been in the state since 1994. But we won't go too much into that. But he's very, very well versed when it comes to cannabis legislation and politics, as well as Amanda Borup is one of the top policy analysts at the OLCC. And she actually was a sounding board for the creation of our tutorial. So we bounced a lot of our content off of her to make sure that it was true and accurate. And I think that she would be a great guest to have on the show when we do talk about that stuff.
very well said. It's very, very much important to keep reiterating within the written stuff, and when we're talking about it, there's been no lack of detail put into the compliance side of this is not something that anybody wants to dive into with any lack of planning, because we understand the punitive nature of the reactive nature of the state. And so what we're looking to do is to give everybody a blanket of safety within all of this, knowing that all of the forethought and all the planning has gone into this, and then the double checking has also happened with the regulatory bodies, because there's OLCC, but then there's the Attorney General's office, and both of those things are kind of like a hierarchy, but we're looking at, a lot of the people out there are looking to meld the OMMP in with the OLCC and make it one regulatory body, and that's going to be detrimental. Obviously opinions will vary, but the way that the trend is, it's going to be detrimental to the actual livelihoods of people who are at risk. And so when you page through these slides, you can read how each individual type of license can take their individual role within this, because this is literally a game of knowledge. It's like chess, where if you don't know you can make the move, you can't make the move, and you really can't strategize any series of moves if you don't know what each game piece can do. And this is us spelling out the chessboard for everybody. And so we're going to have to spend some time in future iterations of this to really get into the meat and potatoes of the tutorial. And Pete's a great contributor. The OLCC analysts would be great contributors. And then I think it would even be reasonable to have a dispensary manager on and get their perspective about what are the common thoughts that go through their head from the point of view of can I be charitable? How do I be charitable? How can I be charitable in the most economic way, where my time is so limited? How can I do the most with the least amount of overhead to my time and my schedule?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I'd like to jump in here and mention is that we've actually made contact with some OLCC licensees who are independently engaging in the very activity that we're asking them to. And that is actually scheduled to be talked about in, is it future podcast? No, it's this one. Yeah, that's actually scheduled for later on in our podcast today.
Well, excellent segue. We have so much to talk about within the tutorial. Let's go into things that are more relevant to the now, the current events section for Oregon, and we kind of got a local, national, and international fractal here, and so much is going on. What's like top on the list for local for you right now? Give us just an overview.
Okay, well, top on the list for local right now for me has been the perceived increase in well, not increase, but it's just a blatant viewport into the fact that there's still a lot of misinformation and uneducation happening within our hospital systems and our police forces. That where patients who are legally using or in possession of cannabis are, being, victimized. And I guess there's no better way to, no other way to put it. Can't really sugarcoat it. Like, for example, this, I have a story both that talks about this on both the local and the national level. But like just recently, we had a local comedy personality by the name of Dustin Brandon, who was recently hospitalized at OHSU after being struck by a vehicle. What we don't, and Dustin is actually he's wheelchair bound and has a skeletal condition that makes his bones very brittle. So this vehicle impact was extremely damaging to him. And I guess a friend of his had brought him some legally purchased pre-rolls from an OLCC retailer and brought them to him at OHSU. Now, OHSU is a federally funded facility, so bringing the cannabis products inside of a federal facility was the first mistake. However, the way that the employees handled it once the hospital, the way that the hospital staff handled the situation once it was discovered that Brandon had these products, I think could have been handled in a much better fashion. The authorities were called. His property was taken from him and subsequently destroyed after a very rude and stressful interaction with the police when they confiscated his property.
This is something that we're finding is happening in the fractal. It's happening on the international level. It's happening on the local level, and it's very easy to sometimes sit inside of Oregon or inside of California or inside of Washington, a state that's been legal for a bit, and think that you're insulated from experiences like this. And then we're reminded again, snap back to reality. This is still the drug war live in your face, 2 inches from your nose. And Dustin Brandon is a local social media influencer as far as I'm concerned. And he goes by the handle of the number 2, less, LESS, LEGS. It would be really amazing for anybody listening to this broadcast to get onto their Instagram and go over to his Instagram and give him a follow and give him some support as he's on the mend, as we called it when you're recovering, and just give him some support and give him some love over there, because it's really difficult to heal when you're just a normal individual, but when you got a bone or connective tissue disorder, it's altogether more challenging to come back from a accident or from an injury like this. And this is a big one. We give him a lot of love, and he's going to be a great example of the demographic that can be so deeply benefited and impacted immediately by a charitable organization such as Project Scarecrow. And it would be really reasonable at a future juncture when Dustin Brandon can do it is to be a guest on the podcast here and talk about some of his activities, because he's also doing his part to bring the charitable activities to the forefront within the events, and to bring it all together to keep the culture intact, and just to make events be a more center stage aspect of everything that's going on, so that we can, be authentic in what we're doing. And, without going too far down that avenue, we had a recording with a gentleman that lives in Missouri by the name of Nolan Sousley, in almost a carbon copy experience where he's, in a hospital setting, and he's dealing with a very serious form of cancer, and there's a scent coming out of his possession, and somebody brings in the law enforcement, and there's just a sense of belligerence on behalf of law enforcement, and then a sense of total apathy on behalf of the medical staff. And so we have this ongoing environment of powerlessness on behalf of the citizenry, and it doesn't matter if your identity is of an automobile operator, or a person walking down the street, or a person that takes on a patient status within a clinic or a hospital. It seems like we're being kind of degraded at every platform within this country in 2019. And having a nonprofit spring to life here is really going to give everybody a whiff of the smelling salts to show not only this is happening, but we're more empowered when we're unified, and that this is maybe a platform for that unification to occur.
I really hope that it will be, and that's a big intent of ours, is to help people have a voice where they otherwise didn't feel like they had one. And speaking of having a voice, I would love for Dustin to join us on this podcast at some point, but it may have to wait for an undisclosed amount of time. He recently had to go into surgery to have a halo device put on his leg. I don't know if the halo device is really the correct term, but where they put these rings and these rods to hold his bones in place in his leg. It's an external apparatus that is designed to hold his bones together in place while he heals. And during that surgery, his windpipe or his voice box was damaged. So this person who spent a lot of time using their voice to communicate is now voiceless, and is having to go through rehab regarding that. And to kind of add insult to injury, this is caused him to be unable to be a co-host at this Oregon Hemp Fest coming up next month. So Brandon really needs our support right now, and needs a lot of needs a lot of love from everyone who can spare a few moments to go to his Instagram page and send him a little love and encouragement, because we need people with his tenacity in our midst, and he needs a lot of support from us.
This is going to be really an ongoing expansion of inviting anybody who feels as though it's their time to speak on behalf of people who are in that disadvantaged demographic. And there's just so much diversity within that pool of people. People from all walks of life have been adversely affected by what we're now just dubbing as legalization. But this is it's a whole ball of worms, or a whole can of worms, or a whole ball of wax. And we're going to flesh this out in future iterations of the podcast about how things go from having a goodwill vote at the ballot box to, losing a very, very important program within the state. We never would have thought this could have happened in a state like Oregon, where the medical program had such a long-standing reality within the framework, within the communities and all of that, and it got wiped away within a matter of just a couple of years. So if it can happen here, it's most certainly can happen in states that have had less time to really integrate those medical communities and the medical demographic within their various regions. And so the writing is on the wall, obviously. And if we can communicate out to other states that are kind of wrestling with the you know, the ways of looking at cannabis, you know, we're speaking from some pretty serious experience here, where it's like the lines will be drawn in the sand, and people will be forced to step on one side of the line or the other. And then you realize after a while that separating yourselves from everybody is actually detrimental, you know, and that it's all about, you know, kind of like the bottom line, the bottom line, the bottom line. Well, that means money, of course. That means profit, of course. And now here we are, you know, at least within the Oregon ecosystem, people that are in the industry are struggling because of the saturation, because of the overregulation, because of the recidivist policies that are taken on the pretense of mitigating safety, when really it's on the pretense of propaganda, which is that THC is actually a dangerous thing, or a social menace. And here there's so many people that get so much therapy, so much medical efficacy, and the whole removing yourself from addiction, the whole removing yourself from the trauma-based cyclical emotional trap. There's so much to be said on that. And I think that the events are going to really play a part in people seeing in the eyes of other people that it's been kind of a long road, and we all recognize each other within our various roles, because nobody's really at fault. No one person is at fault for any of this. This has all been a collective, I don't like to be harsh sounding, but a collective nightmare. You know, we've all played a part in some way, in some manner.
Absolutely, I agree with you there. And speaking of problematic legislation, one of the other things that has been happening here locally in Oregon is that the Oregon legislature has been introduced a bill called Senate Bill 218. And what that does is they will allow the OLCC to have authority to suspend issuing licenses to cannabis industry participants at their whim. And basically, they want to be able to control production. They want to be able to control the volume of the supply chain, because they think that's the solution to stemming over this you know, what I call an artificially created oversupply. And I don't think that's the answer, because that's a step backwards. I think what we should be focusing on is as far as that goes, because once you give a government agency complete control over the supply chain of an agricultural commodity, which is what hemp and cannabis are. I mean, I know we're you know, legally we're talking about two different things here, but let's not split hairs. If you but so I don't think it's the appropriate action to give the OLCC total dominion over, you know, who can and can't produce cannabis here in the state of Oregon.
It's an executive privilege that the people who have seen the detrimental moves that the OLCC has already taken on its own, what do they call that, individuated or its unilateral behalf. I'd like to hearken back to the 1 ounce limit that they decided to come out with just overnight. They didn't reach out to anybody. They didn't maybe consult the governor's office first to see if they could even make a change on their own unilaterally. And they went ahead and put a purchasing limit on the patients. And so that really created a reactive mentality on behalf of anybody who's looking to keep the patient status intact and keep it meaningful. And so, you know, we're now seeing that this is just more unilateralism on behalf of the OLCC. And, you know, you use the word artificial glut or artificial saturation, and that is a problem. That's something that it could even be said that it's like not even it's a mislabeled problem. It's not even a saturation. It's just a market limitation that we're artificially dealing with, and that the regulatory body is having to deal with this thing called interdiction, where it's when you stop people from licensing and they make cannabis for a living, they're just going to keep on making cannabis and exporting it the way that they always did. So you're actually boosting the Yeoman market, the Yeoman economy, and doing it through indirect ways. And so this is something obviously we'll flesh out in great detail as we go forward, because a lot of the policy, is what you would call a 2 steps backward kind of approach to any type of improvement in the status quo. It doesn't help the status quo. It literally makes it even worse. And so something to be said about right now here in Oregon, if you're in queue for a production license, you're around 9 to 13 months out. All right. So essentially there is just a dead standstill in people waiting to be activated within this economy. And so the legislation kind of just puts some fingernails behind a clenched fist that's already, they're doing less than 1 application per day. So you can just imagine the backup queue of applications that are in there, and they're not putting any more manpower towards getting these moved through the funnel. It's literally just their typical bureaucratic, slowdown. And so this is a way for, I don't know, it's a way for medical identities to automatically become more relevant, because you're taking away a taxed production identity. If you can't license yourself that way, what else can you do? Well, becoming a medical grower and being a part of a nonprofit is becoming more and more likely that could be an avenue in the future. So this is just going to be a really interesting development as it goes.
Right. Well, the way that things are right now is that the Senate Bill 218 has passed the House, and but it has passed the House with what they call -6 amendments. And ultimately what that boils down to is the -6 amendments. They basically state that if the 218 bill passes with the -6 amendments, then they'll be able to have the authority to stop issuing licenses, but they have to finish what's currently in the licensing queue before they revisit making that decision. And the kind of redundant part of this whole thing is that back in January, the OLCC already decided to stop issuing licenses. They haven't been, to stop taking applications, I should say. So they haven't taken new applications since January of this year, if my information is correct. And, at the rate of processing like less than 1 application a day, I think they're at like 0.7 applications a day, or some arbitrary number like that. So it's going to take about 3 years for them to catch up, because I think last time I looked at the statistics, there were about a little over 1,000 applications that are currently in the queue to be reviewed. And at the rate of 0.7 per day, that's still going to take them roughly 3 years to get through the whole thing. Perhaps even a little bit more. Before they're caught up. And so that's just, I think that this whole bill, honestly, is a giant waste of the taxpayers' money and the time of the politicians and activists that this bill would affect. I think it's a huge waste of time, because the solution, honestly, to, I guess, curtailing what they call oversupply, it's not an oversupply problem, it's a distribution problem. And I know I'm parroting the words of Adam Smith right now, but Oregon has historically been an export the cannabis has historically been an export crop for Oregon, whether you're talking about, um, well, seeing as it's exporting over state lines, that's the way historically Oregon has treated cannabis, in the free market, in the unregulated market, and that's and to take an entire community, um, and to limit them to only what they can sell within their state of operation, is devastating for an industry that is poised, specifically for export. And if by not maintaining residency requirements early on, when Measure 91 was originally passed, that's why we're seeing a lot of flooding of the cannabis market here in Oregon, is because we originally had a limit of 2 years of residency that you needed to be able to demonstrate before you could be issued an OLCC cannabis license here in Oregon. But before Measure 91 was voted on and passed in 2015, in November, there was a huge lobby to have the residency restrictions lifted. And that was funded by out-of-state investors and spearheaded by a very prominent cannabis lawyer in Portland. I'm not going to name names just now.
The thing to bring up here, you used the term or the phrase "a complete waste of the taxpayer dime and time and money and everything like that." And I think that it's worth mentioning that there's a seedy underbelly to this bill, and that there's already a understood norm that the OLC is dragging its feet on processing applications. So there's this long queue of applications. And so we know this is going to be the case unless they just throw more manpower, make a huge change in the way that they handle things. And we know that's just not likely to happen. And so what ends up happening is you have kind of like this under economy of reselling licenses. And the economy gets a huge injection of speculative value if a bill like this were to be able to get squished through. Because if you can literally give the OLCC executive privilege over limiting, how many licenses of what type get brought into the system, then you can speculate on the resale value of licenses much, much more easily. So all of these foreign corporate entities get this wonderful, wonderful speculatory market to use lawyers to do conglomerations, mergers, resales, exits, parachute strategies, doing anything in a quiet and seamless way nowadays in the cannabis industry is so valuable, because this is a particular market that uses social networking to spread the word about things. So if your company can merge or do its thing quietly and seamlessly without a lot of ripple effect, more power to you. You're going to be able to go far and get out of a market that is going to be struggling for a foreseeable future. And, if this, I don't know what to speculate if this is going to pass or not, but if it does, it automatically makes the value of these licenses that already exist in the system go way, way, way up. And so all of the lawyers, all of the shareholders of these initial licenses will be very, very pleased with that capacity to ask a premium for the sale of that speculatory license, for a new company to snatch it up and put it in its portfolio, or just outside entities to colonize the existing Oregon market.
Well, let's not forget about the fact that giving the OLCC total power over who gets licenses or not basically opens up a huge gateway for opportunities for bribery to happen, and just it puts the OLCC in a position of great power and influence. And where great power and influence lies, corruption quickly follows. Based on my experience,
Right.
so I think that centralizing power like that is just generally a bad idea. Um, that's that's why we have checks and balances on our president, and we don't call him emperor. And now, the current political and climate aside, but that's typically that's how it's supposed to work. We have an office of president, but that person doesn't have total centralized control over the entire government. There are other branches of government that are meant to balance out that authority. And I think that by giving the OLCC total control over who gets issued licenses is just generally a bad idea. That's a lot of influence and power to give to one organization.
The whole history of liquor and nepotism is just so rich in America that I think anybody could make a real strong case, with very little reference to the historic nature of everything surrounding the liquor control and whatnot. So, the reactiveness of people in Oregon towards enmeshing OMMP and OLCC even more, it's going to be there. And I think that nonprofits such as this one, hopefully with the use of events, can really start to aggrandize everybody's voice and unify everybody's resources to really make a major impact on the status quo. I think that's a reasonable segue here. We got a segment here that is going to touch on some of the wins, losses, grievances, and hardships around the state, any accommodations we'd like to make within the community. These are things that are important to the members, any spotlights or any location spotlights. I think it's reasonable to bring up the recent deadening of a piece of legislation that had to do with the legalization of social consumption in the licensing of some type of lounge type of environment. So we're looking at a perceived setback where a lobby push was made. People rallied around a potential measure that could be pushed through the legislative process, and it just didn't get the support that it needed. And we're kind of what you would call back to square one. Is there anything that you'd like to bring up around that, or is there anything else around the wins, losses, and grievances and hardships category?
Well, as far as the consumption bill not making it through this year, I think that just goes to demonstrate that when people don't participate in the rulemaking process, we get rules that we don't like. And that is going to happen over and over and over again until the general public decides that they've had enough and that they're going to pull their heads out of the sand and start paying attention to the world around them. Because whether you like it or not, the people who pay attention to politics and exercise their voice in the legislative and rulemaking process that goes on every year, not just about cannabis, but about everything. I think a lot of our general populace is too wrapped up in Game of Thrones, in football games, in the playoffs, in movies. And it's cake and circuses, bread and circuses, excuse me. And it's just the general populace, they about the way things are, but nobody wants to do anything about it. And I think that's just a shame. And I think that the deadening of the social consumption bill, which a lot of people wanted, the consumption lounges bill, a lot of people wanted it. Again, nobody, it didn't get enough support. And that's how these things fail, is people with an apathetic attitude towards the legislative process and rulemaking within their local and state communities. They lose. You will lose if you continue to have an apathetic attitude towards laws and rules and how they're developed in your local community, your state, and the nation.
Well, this is a great segue then. Apathetic attitude lies on one end of the pendulum swing, and then the good natured scarecrow is on the other end of that spectrum and pendulum swing. And you've got a blog post on the website titled "What Makes a Scarecrow?" And I think that's going to be a really great resource for anybody who wants to get to the real crux of the matter around, what is the status quo, number one, what's happening to create harm, create suffering, create these undesirable experiences for people around the state, and then how can you be the most efficient in your impact on how to make a change within that. And that there is a huge pool of people out there who are excellent in their field, doing really, really smart, amazing things within the cannabis ecosystem. And they've been able to get that good by being supremely focused and to have an unending, thirst to improve and to get better. And now there's a way for all of these various types of people that are all individually excellent in their little segment of the field to come together and to, create an enriching event experience. And that, it's going to feel a little awkward at first, maybe like a junior high dance where the boys and the girls are on opposite ends of the gym for a little while. But the truth of the matter is we're all going to recognize each other's faces. We are all part of the same OMMP system. To begin with, the whole unregistered community as well. We're all from the same background. So the truth of the matter is that plus now, because a lot of people move to Oregon to become a part of a regulated industry. So you got the core plus, right? And nobody needs to be ostracized anymore. The hardship is the ostracization.
Absolutely correct. And, I'd like to use this opportunity to segue into bringing up a few businesses and individuals that have, created ways to make themselves shine in our community. And and one of them is a location just outside of Salem in Kaiser, Oregon, called the Patient Grower Network. And the Patient Grower Network is run by a woman named Kim Strand, and they are a safe access point for local Salem area cannabis consumers, many of them who are either current or former Oregon medical marijuana patients. They have local cannabis. They have local cannabis-friendly entertainment, and they're a social spot for regular events and musical guests. They regularly host bingo nights, poker games. They have a couple pool tables. They have a large kitchen downstairs that can be used for events. And they have snacks and TV and gaming systems and all kinds of stuff. It's like a giant rec house. It's like a giant rec room for where people can safely and legally consume cannabis. Because here in Oregon, we spoke about our consumption lounges bill dying recently, and what that leaves us here with in the state of Oregon. Cannabis consumers really don't have anywhere to go unless you're a private property owner or you have permission from a property owner to consume cannabis on somebody's property, because there are no public consumption allowances here in the state of Oregon. If you're caught consuming cannabis in a public place, you will be issued a citation by the police.
That's a really great thing to do is to just give the lounges that are in existence some exposure, because it's been a long, hard road, kind of a shadowy, gray, cloudy, foggy road, because there's just not a lot of clarity on regulation and on the right to exist, the right to congregate, the right to be able to do these things. These people have been influencers in their own right, just by the mere fact that they cease to exist. They'll never cease to exist. They're always out there keeping their locations open so that people have a place to get together. And I always like to bring up with regards to PGN Lodge is that it's got great acoustics. It's historically a church and a lodge, so it has some architecture that really lends well to putting some musical instruments in there and jamming out. So anytime I see a good band going on down there, I always know that people are kind of being treated to an acoustically cool experiences. You just can't say that about a lot of cannabis events, because they're set up based on where you can put the event together, not put together where the music is going to sound the best. So a lot of times you get treated to really badly engineered, acoustic stuff at cannabis events, and you have to deal with it because of the way that the environment is kind of construed.
Absolutely, and I've been to several musical events at PGN. Ty Curtis has been there at least multiple times over the past couple of years, and he's always a fun show to go and watch. Very talented musician and songwriter. But let's see. I wanted to touch on. I wanted to touch on the other, kind of local heroes, for example. And I'll get to events again here shortly. You mentioned events earlier, but other heroes, locally that are standing out in the community. We have Genesis Farms, which is run by Sean Beeman. He's the owner, and he is actually working with two OLCC retailers to donate his products to patients using the allowances that are already built into the OLCC regulatory structure, meaning that he is transferring his legally produced and metric tracked cannabis tinctures, edibles, and honey sticks and things of that nature to two different OLCC retailers: the Flower of Life in Eugene and the Fireside Dispensary out of Medford. And I would love to, and Sean has actually already consented to being on the podcast with us. So perhaps in the coming weeks, we will be able to get Sean to jump on with us and talk about what he's doing and how we can work together to bring this thing to bring this donation concept statewide.
That's going to be such an important conversation, because the integral duty or the integral role that processors will play within this whole logistics program is just, it cannot be overstated. And Sean has kind of been a longstanding, proactive individual with his company Genesis Farms. There was so much of his product out in the medical dispensaries. Anybody who was getting their therapeutic stuff through the dispensary back when there were a lot of medical stores, is that you did see Genesis Farms in a lot of different forms, and he has a lot of experience, and so he's not wet behind the ears at all. And I think that his depth of experience is going to be extremely important to just, basically sound off on, what do you think of this idea, or what do you think about this? Because we can be creative within this, but experience is going to play a huge role in the success of this. And already with the board on your Project Scarecrow roster is just bringing a huge depth of experience, and you can kind of have some camaraderie with some of these processors and producers that are out there that maybe you haven't done a collaborative project before, but you'll immediately respect each other's experience. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. And, I'm really glad to be working with Sean. Sean has, like you said, he's been a huge proponent for patients' access and patients' rights since the beginning. I mean, he's a what we call in the industry, he's a medical guy through and through, is what we all call ourselves. We're all proponents of the original intent behind the medical program, which was to serve patients, and not to serve, not necessarily just to serve ourselves, but to have that be a symbiotic relationship where producers and processors could have a reciprocative, what's the word I'm looking for? A reciprocal relationship with their patients, the people who rely on the access and potency that these producers provided, and that it was what the medical platform was, taking care of patients was built in, and I want to see our emerging, what we call what I refer to as the adult use market, to take that same concept, and instead of it being a forced relationship like it was with the medical program, and like some other proponents of some interesting tax proposals have said, but rather it be on a volunteer basis, so that it's true altruism and true charity, instead of at the risk of a punitive response from the like, for example, if you were caught breaking the rules, and as a medical grower, then you lost your ability to grow for patients. And it's the same, and that same kind of concept is translated over to the adult use market. And in some historical ways, that kind of punitive response, do it our way or there's going to be punishment kind of attitude works. But I think that there's a lot to be said for having more of a cooperative approach rather than a punitive one.
Well, this is going to be really interesting to see what the impact it has on the regulatory body, both the OLCC and the legislators that have been so central to whether or not a piece of legislation goes forward, if it kind of dies and suffocates. I'd like to take a little moment here on the screen share. We are showing the Triforce graphic that was very central to your trying to translate the concept of the nonprofit as just one simple graphic. And in each corner, it has a logo. And you took a lot of care to give every individual segment of this project its own identity within a logo. And I wanted to point out the logo is in the right-hand side, that it's a business member. And then we just got done talking about Genesis Farms, where it is a business. It exists within the licensing system, and it has a long-standing identity, so to speak. It came from the medical ecosystem and translated over to the OLCC, and it's been reasonably long-standing. And so they may end up deciding that they would like to be a business member and to pay an annual fee to make that happen for themselves. But it might also be that Sean is himself an OMMP patient, so he might also want to be an actual supporter member. And there's nothing stopping him from having both identities. He can make Genesis Farms be the business member and be his, his personal name be the Scarecrow. And that there's going to be a lot of instances of that all around the state where people, are indeed involved in a business, and they'll make a decision whether or not that business is going to be a business member. But they may also just want to be a Scarecrow, just be an individual member. And that'll be something that'll be really interesting to have a lay of the land in 3 and 6 months and a year to see how people kind of decided to how to entertain their participation with this, because we're giving just unending options on how you can participate.
Absolutely, Thomas, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Being a business member is an amazing, in my opinion, an awesome thing you can do for your business. But at the end of the day, again, that membership is exclusively for the business, and it doesn't impart any individual benefits. It doesn't get you a personal membership card, and it doesn't get you, it doesn't entitle you to the same recognition as regular supporter members. So there's definitely inherent benefits that are unique to each membership type. Let's not forget about the patients either, who will also have a unique membership card and place and role to play in this whole mission. The patient members are the people that we're all dedicated to serve, and we need to make sure that their wants and needs are taken into account at all stages of decision making. So
this gives us an opportunity then to talk about the overriding objectives of Project Scarecrow, and to just recap the most streamlined way to get in touch and to contact the organization. Right now, you're in a donation phase, so obviously having the opportunity to get in touch with you, or just get in touch with your PayPal, just having those resources right at the fingertips. What's the best way to get in contact with the organization right now?
So the best way to get in contact with us is also the best way to donate, by using our Project Scarecrow email. So we can be reached at info@projectscarecrow.org. And that is the same email that you would use to search for us on PayPal to make a donation. Okay. The other ways that we can be reached are by telephone. You can reach me at my office phone at 503-779-7755. And that will ring directly to me. Other than that, we can be reached through the chat function on our website. We can also be reached through our Facebook page. We have a Twitter account, Instagram, and you can also find me milling around on some of the blog posts and articles on the Cannabis Public Citizens Forum.
Well, there's something to be said here. The website was engineered with a live chat function. So when you navigate to it, either in mobile or in full browser form, you can find in the lower right that there's a little icon that has to do with the chat applet or application. And what's beautiful about that is you can submit your information, you can submit a question, you can opt into the newsletter, do a lot of different things to just reach out. But the most beautiful thing is that if you actually have an application that's filled out, you can upload your application right through that chat applet, and you can totally get around the use of email or the use of any other type of communication. Is you can go straight to the website and upload that application, and it offers kind of the most secure way to interface if you already have your application all filled out. And the response time on that is going to be very good if you're willing to get kind of a 24-hour turnaround on your chat window. That's probably a reasonable approach. But a lot of times you may find that we're very responsive around that. If you have any just fleeting questions, don't be afraid to just pop it right into the chat.
Yeah, you can, yeah, absolutely. You can pop it right into the chat, or one of us is usually available on Facebook. So we have a Project Scarecrow Facebook page, and I'm on there quite a bit.
Well, this has really been excellent. We're going to bring the podcast to the public. How often, Dale?
Oh, well, hopefully I'd like to be able to do an episode a week. But depending on how things develop, and how much assistance we have in getting things accomplished, we might have to push that out to once every 2 weeks. But we'll see how things go.
Time is always of the essence, and we're gonna essentially look at this as a labor of love, because the podcast interface is a passive product that people can digest at their leisure. It's something that we can do flexibly in our schedule. So this hopefully will be something that we're getting more refined as we go. The truth of the matter is we've got some real important interviews coming up with regards to Peter Gendron, any OLCC representative that would be willing to come on and talk about the tutorial. And then again, some of these more prominent processors and producers that are going to be jumping into the possibility of helping the project in its very early stages.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you, Tom, for your time and your expertise today. You're an amazing comrade as far as this podcast is going. I'm quite pleased with how it's turned out.
Happy to hear that. This will be fun for next time. We're looking at a possible weekly or bi-weekly approach to this. This is the Cannabis Citizens Public Forum. We're looking to bring communication, unification, and leadership to the forefront within the cannabis space. Today, we're speaking with Dale Petersdorf with the new 501c3 nonprofit out of Salem, Oregon, called Project Scarecrow, looking to help preserve, cultivate, and mitigate here in the state of Oregon. And it's been a real fun conversation. We look forward to next time. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Tom. Have a good day.